I didn't know how we were going to get out of it. This little boat's got an outboard engine and a 5-gallon tank. And we've got to go into these waves. The island right there was just cliffs and rock. So you couldn't, it's like, there's no place to go. I'm a child of God, right? I'm a husband, father of 4 fantastic kids. And the best part is 2 amazing grandbabies. And then I'm a missionary. God called me when I was just a kid and had the privilege of serving him as a missionary for 26 years.
That's awesome. Where all have you served in your missions work?
So we did 2 years in the Kingdom of Tonga, which is like one of the last true kingdoms in the world. And then we moved to Vanuatu, and we've been in Vanuatu since then. You know where
That's awesome.
Vanuatu is, right?
I have no idea, to be honest with you. I'm not going to front.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So, if you can imagine Australia down here, then like New Zealand here, so we're 1,000 miles due east of Cairns, Australia, and 1,500 miles north of Auckland, New Zealand. So halfway between Australia and Fiji. And if you may just have to get a globe to figure out where that's at. But Vanuatu is this really cool country of about 82 inhabited islands and 300,000 people and 120 languages.
That's awesome. What kind of work did you do there? Were you doing like you made a business and were you teaching English or what was the deal there?
So we went to Vanuatu because of those 120 languages. There was about 40 of them when we went where there was no church of any kind. And so we went to do pioneer evangelism and church planting. So what did we do? We did everything. First of all,
Yeah.
these tribes live in very remote contexts. So we put on backpack and hiking boots and climbed the mountains and swam the rivers and did whatever we had to do to get there. Once we got there and began to interact with these tribes, and we were talking incredibly remote places, places where there's no road access in, nobody bothers wearing clothes. Nobody had ever learned how to read and write. There's no medical. It's almost like Stone Age. They didn't always want us there. So to be there, we started schools, we started medical clinics, we dug water wells, we started adult literacy schools, whatever we had to do to have permission to interact with people. Because if you can just spend enough time talking to people, sooner or later they want to know why you're there. And you get to talk to them about Jesus. And you win that first person to Jesus. And then you teach them how to read and write and pour into their life, disciple them, and they ultimately become the pastor of the first church. And if you do it right, it's like a snowball. It just builds and gets momentum as it goes. And you go from, hey, I won one person in this tribe to Jesus to we have a network of churches in this tribe. And man, it's been a blast. It's been really, really fun.
I know that's awesome. It's cool that you did literally anything and everything to spread the gospel in that context.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. So let's do some. I got some like silly get to know you questions here.
Surely.
If you could get rid of one restaurant in in America, any like major franchise, what would it be?
That's so tough. There's restaurants you just don't like. And then when you go live overseas in a place where there's no fast food at all, so my knee jerk reaction would say, let's get rid of McDonald's.
Yeah.
And yet, there's days where you've sat there and ate nothing but taro for a week, 3 times a day. And you're like, I would die for a Big Mac right now.
Right.
Yeah,
It's like,
we
you
eat some
hate it in
interesting
America, but
stuff.
then you take it for granted over there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What
Yeah.
is taro?
So taro is it's a root crop. Yeah, a lot of people grow like these big elephant ear plants in their flower gardens. Maybe you've seen them as you've driven through a neighborhood or whatever. But that's the root of that, and it has no taste. It's just bland, starchy. But a lot of the tribes that I had worked among, what they do is they put that taro root in the fire that night, and they just let it cook until it cooks through, and then they just pull it out of the fire and scrape the ashes off, and that's supper. It's hot taro, and then breakfast is a cold piece from the night before, and then lunch is some leftover breakfast, and then to that, look, man, if they can catch a bat or a snake or a lizard or a bug or you name it, then that promptly gets just put over the fire. So, like, we have the world's biggest bats in Vanuatu. So the wingspan, like, 3.5 feet kind of thing, big bats. And they catch one, they'll break the wings off and shove a stick through it and just turn it over the fire until it cooks. And it's truly one of the foulest foods in the world.
I know. I was
Like,
going to ask you what this bat tastes like.
oh, bat tastes like, I'm trying to think of a polite word to say. It tastes like bat poop. It is because bats hang upside down all the time, right? And they
Right.
yeah. You can get the mental picture. It does not taste good.
Gotcha. Some guana.
Yep, there you go. That's the word.
So then when you're over there, what's the number one food that you miss from America then?
Reese's peanut butter cups, man. That's it.
All right.
That's it. That is the number one food, and it's funny because when I'm in America, I never eat them.
Really? I know. I'm like, I'll give you a bag at Momentum this fall
I
if you go.
know. But when I'm in America, like sometimes I'll show up at a church and people will have heard me say that and they'll give me some and my kids really like it. But yeah, it's funny. I'll eat one or two when I get home and then that solves it. But
And
while
then
you're
you're good.
there,
You're good for 4 years.
yeah, while you're there, you're just thinking about it and craving. Man, I wish I could have a Reese's peanut butter cup.
Gotcha. So you're going to be one of our speakers at Momentum in
Yeah.
November, and you're doing the Speed the Light session. So how about you give us like a little teaser on the word that God's laid on your heart that you're thinking of bringing?
Well, couple of things. We're gonna talk about the nature of missions, just in the sense that if you're going to sign up for this, you need to sign up for the hardest thing you've ever thought about doing. And then I want to just go from some statements Jesus made between the resurrection and the ascension. Those 40 days, there's 8 different ways that Jesus said go, or 8 different words he used, and I won't do all 8. He used them 32 different ways. I won't do all 32, but we'll come up with 3 or 4 of those go words that we'll talk about while I'm there.
Cool. Yeah, I want to zero in on that statement you made, it being the hardest thing you ever done, and hearing that, it's like there's some people who are like, "Oh yeah, bring on the pain." Like I'm all about hard things, but then there's some people who and like most of us who would be like, "That sounds really hard. I want nothing to do with that." What would you say to those people who are like, I've never been a missionary, but it sure dang looks hard, and that makes me hesitant to participating in it or like even being open to the idea that God's calling me else out there.
Yeah, that's fair. I think if you're gonna, well, first of all, I want everybody to hear God's voice. I want us to be open to hearing what God has to say to us. I would say that whatever God calls you to do, He gives you the grace to do it. So if you're sitting in America where you have all the conveniences and technology and connectivity, etc., then no, it seems impossible. But God doesn't give you the grace for it while you're sitting there. He gives you the grace for it in the moment. And so, more than one occasion, I've told folks this will be the hardest thing that you love to do. I have no regrets about being a missionary. Absolutely love what I've done. And we've done some hard things. In that moment, though, God gives you the strength to do it. So if it seems too hard, that's okay because God will take care of you.
Can you share a story of where God has taken care of you in like just the really hard moment when you were over there?
Yeah. So we left this village called Wumpuku, and got on a boat. We were supposed to take about a 4 hour trip over to another place called Pemu. I know you know where that's at. That's why I'm telling you the names, right? But as we come around this point called Hakua, before we went around the point, we couldn't see what the weather was like on the other side. So maybe let me put this in context. We're in an aluminum boat that's 20 foot long, and has I mean there's it's just an open boat. And we turn around this corner of Hakua, and the waves are over 30 foot high, and they're being driven by this really hard wind. So sometimes you have big waves, but they're just nice and rolling and smooth, and the boat can go up and then down. No, these were ugly ones. At the top, they're breaking and falling over, onto the wave. And so the thing about it is, once we went on the corner, we couldn't go back. You can't turn the boat in that kind of wave. If you do, it swamps. The only thing you can do is go forward. And so we were committed as soon as we got into it. And so we go up this 30 foot wave. And as we're going up to the top, it would break and it would just fall over us and just drench us. So the boat just like goes through the wave. And then you come out the other side, you're like flying through the air and you fall and you slam. And it was some pretty desperate moments. Like I was there with my wife, with my 4 kids. I didn't know how we were going to get out of it. And we got this little boat's got an outboard engine and a 5 gallon tank. Okay. And we've got to go into these waves, and to get to the first harbor. So the island right there was just cliffs and rock. So you couldn't. It's like there's no place to go. You couldn't go over to the rock. The waves would just crash you into the rock. And to get to that harbor took us 7 hours. So 7 hours just hanging, clinging onto the side of this little boat. Wind's blowing.
And it was
These
storming
waves
the
are
entire time.
breaking. Say again.
And it was just storming the
It
entire
was just,
time.
there was no break. There was no break. And
Wow.
the incredible thing is, there's no way a 5 gallon tank should have lasted 7 hours. And we had another tank, but in that kind of weather, there's no way you can change. Because what we would have had to do is stop, open the gas tank, and then pour it out of this, like, out of these cans. And you just couldn't. You couldn't do it. And I whispered, "Peace be still." I yelled, "Peace be still." I prayed it in my heart. I mean, I'm doing it. I'm like, "Please, God, save my family." It was a crazy, crazy day. It really was. God never made the ocean quiet. Boy, boy, I wish He would have. But He did get us to a little harbor, and we were able to pull that boat up on the shore and rest. And then the next day the seas were calm, and we were able to complete our journey with calm seas. So it was tough, but God was with us.
Right.
He kept us. I could tell you. There's so many crazy stories.
No,
Um,
I bet.
yeah,
No, and I'm sure we'll hear more of those crazy stories during your talk at Momentum this year. So what's something a few of them. So
yeah.
what's something that a student or a leader watching this can do to start preparing their hearts now for what God will want to do during the mission sessions at Momentum?
I want so much for the students and the volunteers, the youth pastors that are there to have their hearts open to hear from God. Jesus said the harvest is plenteous, but the laborers are few. And He asked us to pray that He would send forth laborers into the harvest. And when I'm coming, I, I'm flying from Vanuatu to Illinois to speak at this one service and then getting on a plane and flying back to Vanuatu. So I'm flying 15 hours to come preach and then flying 15 hours back. And there's only one reason I'm doing that is I am fasting and praying before I come that God will call some of the students and even some of the staff that are present to give their life to serve in missions. So I would say come with an open heart, be ready to hear from God, be willing to let God challenge you to do the hardest thing you've ever done.
That's quite a challenge. I'm stoked to see like if our leaders and students will truly open their heart to that possibility. You know, I'm excited to see what workers rise up from this event.
I am confident that God's going to call some young people to serve as lifelong missionaries. I am confident of that. And I believe in missionaries. I believe God calls and uses missionaries. And I believe that tens of thousands of people can who are without access to the gospel today can come to faith in Jesus Christ because of one of the students that is sitting in that meeting. I know that to be true. I know it. Okay, I've experienced it in my life. I know it to be true. So I'm praying, God, would you call one or maybe a dozen? What a difference we could make for eternity. You know, I had the privilege of going to this little village called Iatapu. And in the language, the local language, it means the holy place. And I won't give you all the details, but never ever been a church in this place. Okay, these people worshiped the volcano, and their village was built around the rim of an extinct crater. The active volcano is like 2-3 miles away, and so it's erupting all the time. We're in the shadow of this volcano. Steam comes out of cracks in the ground. I mean, it's a crazy place. The first time I presented the gospel there, the chief told me, he said, I don't need your God. We don't need your God. Okay. Long story short, we were able to plant a church in Iatapu. And when we had a genesis of believers together, we went down to the ocean to have a baptismal service. And on the left hand side, we did it at sunrise. So on the right, you got the sun just starting to peek over the horizon, and on the left hand side, you got Mount Yasser, and it erupts about every 5 minutes, and there's these glowing chunks of lava and ash spewing up, and it's a pretty cool beach, pretty cool place to do a baptismal service. And as I am as I'm baptizing those new believers from Iatapu, I'm thinking to myself, this is as good as it gets in missions. This is a language group where there's never been a church. I've been able to plant the first church and I'm able to baptize the first believers. Like this is perfect. And then when the baptismal service finished, they stood on the beach and they had a surprise for me. They began to sing a song in their language, worshiping Jesus for redeeming them by his blood. And I know that heaven must have some amazing choirs and some amazing singing going on. But I promise you, Jesus made everybody be quiet in that moment. As he said, that's one more tribe, that's one more language that has been brought into the family of the redeemed. What an incredible privilege to be able to stand in front of Jesus and to say, here's a language group that had no access to you. And I brought the gospel to them. And now here they are. They're serving you, right? They're following you. In Asia Pacific, we have 1,132 language groups that are so underserved by the gospel that most of the people that live in those language groups will never meet a Christian. So my challenge to the youth at this event would be choose one. Which one of those language groups are you going to claim for the king? Man, that's why I say it's the hardest thing you'll ever love to do. Because what could be better than being the one to introduce Jesus to an entire language group without access to the gospel?
I know that's, and I mean, there's going to be 2,000 plus people there. So like we got the numbers.
No, we literally could do it. Think about it, right? Like
Right.
if you had 1,132 people signed up and said, "I'll go," and I know, like not 1,200 people, okay, but we can do this. We can do
Right.
this. You know, Dick Brogden says, let's just do this thing and go home." Right? Jesus said, "The gospel of this kingdom shall be published to all the earth, and then the end shall come." Okay, let's just do this thing and go home. Uh, you know, some people say God's slack concerning his promises because he's taking a long time. But Peter said, no, he's waiting on you. He's waiting on you because there's some who haven't heard yet. So let's just do it. Let's just go. I'm sorry, I'm being preachy.
No, hey, I'm here for it.
Never preached youth conventions when I was young. Now that I have a gray mustache and beard, I get to preach. I don't know. I don't understand it, but thankful for the opportunity. When I was really young, a white-headed missionary by the name of Charles Greenaway came to my church, and he stood in the pulpit, and he wept because there were tribes living in hard-to-reach places without access to the gospel. And the reason he was weeping is because he no longer had the physical strength to go. And he called that night for strong young people who would give their life. That's not the night God called me, but that's the night my heart got open. And I said, I'll go if you want me to, right? And then not very long after his visit, then that's when God called me. And it's been the greatest privilege of my life. It's been a blast.